I'd like to say, well, on behalf of my very distinguished colleagues and myself, thank you for having us, and we're very happy to be able to share this project with you. Um, I think the most efficient way to start might be to just read the brief intro that I had written for the project itself, which I conceived of last fall. So let me just do that quickly. Um, Glass Ceilings, a commission and performance project initiated by Claudia Anderson with the idea to create a program of 4-minute works, solo and solo with electronics, that represent some aspect of the barriers many of us face in our society. With the advent of COVID-19 and the murder of George Floyd, the group discussion of inequality has evolved from primarily women's struggles to a larger conversation, one that explores the artist's role in bringing about real societal change through the catalyst of our music. The goal of the project is to produce meaningful and lasting works of art, first and foremost. Each of the 5 composers has her own approach to composition, and conversations we have had together about the project and about ourselves as we get to know each other enriches the larger dialogue of the project. Because the majority of the compositions are in progress, and because we have had the unwanted luxury of being at home with time to think and process, the 5 of us are glad to share some details of our thoughts with you and hope to bring you into the conversation as well. So, before going on, I think that this would be the appropriate moment to recognize the person who actually made the project possible and who in fact gave me the leeway to create it on this scale by informing me one day last summer that he'd like to fund a commission. After getting up off the floor and realizing what he meant, I embarked on Glass Ceilings. And this person is one of my dearest friends. I've known him for over 30 years, a one-time student, all-time great alto flute player, and fantastic member of our flute community. And this person is Hal Ide. And Hal, would you please say hi? Recognize yourself there? You can come on to video.
Hi.
Thank you, my
Thank you,
dear
Claudia.
friend.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's been an incredible gift, and I know you know I'm grateful. But you are a composer in your own right, a painter, very, very gifted person, and so infinite thanks. Okay, so and so the other thing, just would like to say briefly before we we jump in, is that I want to say how really incredibly lucky I was to capture these 4 amazing women for a project that had no awareness of where we are now when it was conceived. You're going to hear individually what they bring to the table, but you should know that none of us really knew each other at all when we started this. I mean, some maybe intersection through flute and composition, through NFA, but some of us had never actually even met. And we have navigated through the last 3 months of talking through many, many topics, some of them very difficult ones, and to find out who I think we are as a unified force. And I am very profoundly grateful and honored to be part of this group and this force. So the other thing I'd like to say is that this is not a time to be shy or silent. It's a time to stand up and speak our truths. We, as artists, do that through our music, and Glass Ceilings will inevitably reflect this moment in all our lives. We're asking you, our audience, to be with us in this moment. So when we get to the last segment of our panel and hand the conversation over to you, please feel free to speak your own truths with questions and comments. Thank you. Okay, so now let's go. This is how it will work. I'm going to introduce each of our panelists very briefly, very short bios, and then they will take over. Because we decided to do this alphabetically, you get to listen to me for another 10 minutes. So I will begin. Miyazawa artist. Claudia Anderson tours internationally as soloist and with her flute duo Zawa, teaches at Grinnell College and summer festivals in Colorado and Idaho, commissions solo and duo repertoire, serves on the NFA's New Music Advisory Board, publishes with Alry, and has embarked on composition in recent years, in particular with electronic media. When I tried timing myself with my talk, I realized how fast 10 minutes goes by. And because I want to say, more about my music than myself, I had to cut out most of what I was going to say about myself. So suffice it to say, I think that my early life and music background was pretty normal in a lot of ways, but I can say that I kept looking for ways in which the flute did things that wasn't supposed to. I was finding records by Severino Gazzaloni and other sort of out there performers and composers. Even if I was first chair in band and did solo and ensemble and all those normal things. I loved different instruments and different colors. I would hear pieces where I would want to be the French horn or the cello or, the first violin. And so what I kind of realized was that I didn't particularly love the flute. I loved music, and the flute became my vehicle for expression. And therefore, this expanded sense of color in that instrument that I've always, I think, since being a teenager, wanted to keep pushing. I went to the University of Michigan, where I became the resident flutist in the Contemporary Directions Ensemble, a group that still is going, and at the time was funded by a very large Rockefeller grant. I became even more comfortable doing new music, and on the strength of that, I believe, I won a Fulbright to Italy to study with Severino Gazzaloni. And I did study Barrio Sequenza with him, and as most of you I'm sure know, this piece was written for and premiered by Severino. But I also ended up studying Schubert and Mozart and Vivaldi. And the way he taught those pieces was a revelation to me. He used the same extremes of expression and color that he used in Sequenza. And that was not happening in this country at that time. I also, shortly after that, ended up becoming principal flute in one of Italy's major opera orchestras, the Teatro Massimo in Palermo. This turned into a 5-year gig, not what I had thought about originally. So by the time I was done in Italy, after 7 years there, the unusual combination of experiences really helped to define and solidify my approach to the flute, which kind of came down to the idea of theater. New music and opera fit very well into that category, both, sort of real and metaphorical. A love of lyricism from opera, and this is something I often use alto flute for to express in my music. And then the sense of old and new repertoire being equal and not separate, which Gazzaloni was always a proponent for. He said music is the most democratic language we can, profess to be in. And that was another huge gift from him, and something I've always carried forward into my playing and teaching. In this country again, things have changed a whole bunch. But back then it was traditional stuff and weird stuff, and usually the two didn't meet. So I have done commissions, arrangements, many performances of new music over the years. Commissioning in particular with my duo Zawa, with Jill Felber, and creating a body of serious rep for two flutes that didn't really exist when we started, to speak of, probably culminating in our two-flute concerto called Winds for Change, which is a meditation on climate change, and which we have done quite a bit of touring with in the last couple of years. Done all these things all my career, but I came to composition late. And when I did, it seemed natural to be drawn to electronics as the next expansion of my own flute sound. In terms of compositional process, I apologize in advance to my esteemed colleagues because I have way less experience and expertise than all of you as a composer. So I'm very humble in that area. But it may come down to a long-time desire to be the lead guitar in a rock band with, coupled, the insistent need to make the flute speak through the world of extended techniques with an extreme range of expression. So this, one way or another, I have seemed to want to get into my music. So what I'm going to do is play several very short samples. And the first is from my piece called Weather Conversations from 2013. And this piece was my first with electronics, but the electronics were composed not by me, but my colleague at Grinnell College, John Romreim. And John used Max MSP at the time. And what we did was basically I put in a pretty limited number of flute sounds into Max, and key clicks, air sounds, a few arpeggios here and there, pretty simple stuff. And then he manipulated them. And we had a session together where John fed my sounds through Max VariEffects in real time, and I was basically conducting him and saying, oh, let's do a little more of this, or let's go to this. And we ended up with 5 minutes of a soundscape. I composed the live part from that. At the time, I was very glad to have that built-in framework. I'm going to play 3 short samples here from Weather Conversations. And so the first one makes a lot of use of the very dry articulation key clicks that I had put into the sound system. And this is something that goes on for a couple of minutes. I'm going to play just some seconds of it here. And this could, you know, suggest a sort of desert landscape, possibly. Generally don't like to talk about what I feel and hear and see and hear, but for our purposes now, I think this will work. Oh wait, hang on. I need to share. Okay, let's try it. All right, somebody let me know if you're not hearing now. We get into a second section that transitions into some kind of probably water scape here, and this is where the alto flute arpeggios that I had input come in, and also the element of melody. And then we move into a transition to the final area where there's some kind of major cataclysmic weather event coming. Here you will hear the end of this section that you just heard, and you hear these sort of sigh effects that basically pitch bend sigh that in this context kind of sound like sort of seagulls here. So that's Weather Conversations. Now we go ahead to this year, 2020, and Glass Ceilings. And this was my first try, my own soundtrack using Ableton Live. And can I confirm that the sound is good for everyone? You can hear? Okay, thank you. All right. So I had for this piece, I had a structure in my head and in my ears, and actually I'm going to share a story that involves Eve here, because when I wrote to her asking if she would write me a piece, she said, yeah, well, so what do you have in mind, you know? And so I started writing back, and I thought, you know, I have a few sentences, and I realized 3 paragraphs later that I had kind of laid out a piece that evidently I had in my head more than I realized. So Eve wrote back, of course, and said, well, Claudia, I'd really like to write you a piece, but not this one. You need to write this one. And that is actually how I got involved. It's her fault that I'm in the group as a composer. And of course, I have to thank her because I've learned so much in this process. But that's how it evolved. And so this was sort of the other way around. I knew kind of what I wanted to say, but I had no expertise whatsoever in the software. So at the beginning, with Ableton, I spent a couple months going from always terrified to just thinking I probably didn't know what I was doing, but going ahead anyway, and played around with a whole lot of samples, recorded in some of my own sounds, input things, riffs, and so on from a MIDI keyboard. And it seems sort of random, but I was always listening for or going for certain types of sounds or effects, it seemed, when I went to the samples. Anyway, so I ended up with my soundtrack, and I did do a premiere of this piece in February, one of the last actually live concerts I played, and I knew I had to get it ready and finished, and I also knew that it would be you know, tweaked with, changed afterwards. I didn't realize in what context it would be changed, and so what I'm going to play for you is the first minute and 25 seconds of the piece. It starts with alto, flute, goes into C flute, and I'll cut it off when the C flute starts after a little bit. So one thing I will say about the piece that relates to what has happened in our world is that there is a lot of breath and breathing in this piece, and in several different forms. You'll just hear a few of them, but it's a big factor. And of course, breath is a very charged concept right now. And so it has influenced how I am changing some things in the live part. I'm not changing the soundtrack, but you know, that is one effect of reflecting on what has happened in our world. So there's as I said, alto and C flute. This speaks probably to the lyric soprano in me, and then to my inner rock and roll child. So here is the opening of Glass Ceilings. Okay. All right. So there was my indulgent moment. Okay. Well, thank you so much. I've probably gone over my time, but that I hope gives you a sense of what I am doing in this project myself. And now I would like to turn it over to my colleague and friend Eve Beglarian. And Eve, let me just read a little bio for everyone here. According to the Los Angeles Times, composer and performer Eve Beglarian is a humane, idealistic rebel and a musical sensualist. A winner of the Alpert Award in the Arts and Robert Rauschenberg Prize from the Foundation for Contemporary Arts, she is continuing work on an evening-length project about women in Vicksburg, Mississippi from the Civil War to the present, and embarking on a new multimedia collaboration about justice and ecocide. Eve, to you.
Thank you so much, Claudia, and thank you. That's the first I've heard a snippet of Glass Ceilings, I think, and I'm like totally thrilled.
Thank you.
Because I sort of feel a certain, I don't know, like, yeah, because I made you do it. So that's really cool. So yes, let's see. Hi, everyone. This is really awkward. I don't know how to do this, so I'm going to do my best. I'm a composer and not a flute player, although my mother played the flute. So I have a flute in the house, actually, but I don't know how to play it. But you may know me from a piece I wrote a few years ago called I Will Not Be Sad in This World, which is generally for alto flute or bass flute, and is published by Presser and I think pretty regularly. And also last year, thanks to the commissioning committee of the NFA, of whom Lisa, my colleague on this project, Lisa Bost, was the chairman at the time, I wrote a piece for the competition. And that piece is called Can I Have It Without Begging? And it's for C flute and pre-recorded track. And it's sort of a response to the whole Me Too thing, which was unfolding at the time that I had the commission for the piece. There was both Harvey Weinstein, but then of course the whole Bradley Garner story was sort of all over my Facebook feed. So the idea of doing something about Me Too in the context of the flute world seemed like a good thing. And I was using Machaut, a piece by Machaut, the 14th century composer, which ends with the refrain, can I have it without begging? And so there was this idea of making a piece where the live player would be the perpetrator and the tape part would be, you know, the person that the perpetrator was troubling. But in fact, it's sort of complex how it works as a piece to perform, which I'm finding really interesting. At the beginning of the piece, the soloist and the tape are sort of equal. And in fact, the tape part is made up of flute sounds. There's nothing but flute sounds in the tape part. But as the piece goes on, the live player gets more and more insistent and sort of doesn't listen to what the tape part has to offer. But that can be understood in two different ways emotionally, so that the piece is not just, you know, a particular political statement. It has the complexity of power dynamics and how anger works and all of that kind of stuff going on a little bit. So I'm going to play you just a tiny touch of the beginning of the piece and a tiny touch of the end of the piece so that you can see, get a sense, two snapshots of. The trouble is that my mouse has died, so I have to use my trackpad. This is all very complex. Let me see what I can do here. Okay, so I'm gonna bring this over. No, I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna do share computer sound. If I do that, is that enough?
I think so.
All right, so music or computer sound only. Look at that. Bliss. Okay, let me try it. Okay, and then moving towards the very end. Okay, so that's sort of the tiny version of Can I Have It Without Begging? So for this project, the idea I had, can you guys still hear me? Or did I
Yes.
cut my computer sound? Okay, cool. Oh, no, 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 no. Hold on. Sorry. It's continuing to play and it's not even me. I don't know who this is. Okay, sorry. So yes, the idea I had for the piece for Glass Ceilings was something about the pay gap, you know, the gap between how much women make for the same work as men. And we celebrate a day at the end of March, celebrate, whatever, honor a day, which is when women have to work until, in order to get the pay that men got by December 31st, a woman has to work until the end of March to make the same amount of money. That is a year plus 3 months. So I decided I wanted to do a piece that would be about these wacky ratios and making these ratios gradually get to a place that felt like parity. And originally, I had thought of doing it with respect to women and men who are in the same profession and have the exact same attainments. And it turns out that if you select for that, where we're at this point is 98%. That is, someone like me, who, you know, full-time composer, whatever, makes roughly 98% of what the equivalent male would make. And somehow after COVID began, and this whole discussion about essential workers, I realized I'm not really interested in that 2% differential. That in fact, we have this really hideous differential, which is people like me during COVID stayed at home, right? Stopped going outside, stayed at home, went to the grocery store once every 2 weeks, and were basically protected from the worst of COVID by the fact that I could telecommute, I could sit in my house and play the piano and write music. And it's the essential workers, of course, who are far more at risk. And they make roughly, 67 cents to a dollar. So instead of 98 cents to a dollar, we're talking 67 cents to a dollar, or 64, I think it is. And then further, when Black Lives Matter becomes front and center for all of us, if you start breaking down the numbers by race, as well as by gender, if white men are 100, white women are 78.4, Black men are 67, and Black women are 61.4, which is really this horrifying and extremely clear and straightforward manifestation of what we value and what we don't value, right? We do not value people taking care of old people. We do not value grocery workers. We do not value even nurses. The numbers are appalling, even for nurses. So suddenly it's a far more complex set of ratios because I can't figure out exactly how to express this. Because one way to do it would be sort of like the year plus 3 months. So then Black women, that line is, whatever, 162% longer than 100%, right? So it would play longer. Or is it that there are more notes? Or so I'm really struggling with this question of how I want to sort of try to figure out, because Claudia is willing to work with electronics, so we can have these crazy non-standard ratios, and with click tracks, we can make that happen so that you can hear any ratio you want, because Claudia will record with that tempo indication, and she will play with a click track in her ear. So I'm really interested in hearing from all of you about how you would data sonify these things, because it's really confusing and really fun to think about. And I'm having a really powerful time, actually, thinking about all this. How much time do I have left? I forgot to check. Or am I done? Am I done? Oh, I can't hear you, Claudia. You have to.
Okay, here I am. Christina, are you keeping time? I forgot to do it for you.
I'm
So
sorry. I should have checked.
I think you have a couple minutes if you want them.
I think it's a few more minutes until it's about the same time you took. I just wasn't sure what exact amount of time you were allowed.
I took longer because of the intro too. So we were counting on about 10 minutes each. I may have gone over that too, but.
Yeah, I can stop here. I think it's fine. If you're curious and you'd like to hear a piece that's about tempo shifts, I made a piece a few years ago called Well Spent, where the tape part starts at one tempo and gradually slows down. It's pre-recorded and I slow it down until eventually it's like practically not moving at all. And then it's a piece for violin, and the pre-recorded track is also violin. And it's a memorial piece. And the tune that's on the pre-recorded track is You Gotta Take Sick and Die Some of These Days, which is a song by Muddy Waters. And then the live violinist plays in the same tempo throughout. And in the middle of the piece, the tempo of what the violinist is playing, which are arpeggios, and the tune align for a little while, because it started faster than the arpeggios, and then it slows down from there. And it's really simple and kind of an effective way of showing time running out, the sands of time, something like that. So that's what I'm struggling with, is to have something as simple and clear as that to express these numbers about the terrible disparities we have in economic power, buying power of people of different genders and different races. So thanks for listening. And any idea is cool.
Thanks so much, Eve. You can all hear me now. Correct? Great. Okay, we move on to Lisa. And let me introduce Lisa. Lisa Bost-Sandberg, flutist, composer, and improviser who tours internationally as a soloist and chamber musician. She teaches flute at the University of North Dakota, serves on the NFA Board of Directors, and recently completed a term as chair of the NFA New Music Advisory Committee. Welcome, Lisa.
Hi, everyone. I just want to echo the thanks for having us. And I have to say, too, when Claudia approached me about this and said that she had the funding to do some commissioning, I had no idea. I've known Hal for a very long time, and Hal is someone I wish I could see more often, and he's a person who's very near and dear in my heart. So I have to say, as Claudia shared that, Hal, I got just a little worked up. Thank you. Thank you for your support of this. And I also echo those who came before me. I don't know how Allison and Allie feel, but there is kind of that, how do I do this? And I already appreciate how the three of us who have spoken are kind of taking different approaches, and I hope that what we share is, I hope that everyone finds their own way and value and whatnot in this. So for me, the piece I'm writing for Claudia is titled Strikingly, and it is for solo piccolo. This is an interesting project for me because I'm not someone who's drawn towards more concrete concepts to inspire or sort of guide my work. So that's something I've had to wrestle with here and really think about, how do I best connect with this, or how do I reconcile this as a composer, and how do I want to approach it? And one of the things that's been really relevant for me is thinking about the idea of legacy. The fact that my experience as a female composer is different thanks to those who came before, and that our students, our daughters, our granddaughters, those who come after will have a different experience than us too, as the world continues to evolve. So when Claudia asked for a brief description, what I wrote for her was, a thinner and more fractured glass ceiling is the legacy of those who came before. With this comes responsibility, but also celebration, as we are not the same as we were yesterday, nor are we the same as we will be tomorrow. And at that point, this was back in September, I think, little did I know how relevant the last part of that was going to become. I am not the same, we are not the same, society is not the same as 1, 3, or 6 months ago. So as I've gotten to evolve with this piece, my thought process has changed a bit too. Early in the process, I was reading and listening to interviews with female composers, particularly Joan Tower. It's fantastic how her career of more than 60 years, that's just spanned a lot of time and a lot of change and a lot of things. Also, she is one who speaks very eloquently but very succinctly about being a woman composer. And of course, she has her 6 fanfares for the uncommon woman. And she talks about an uncommon woman being one who's adventurous and a risk taker. And that's something that she clearly feels she's seen change over her life, because she now speaks with great excitement about how it's really happening. And more recently, as I've been working on this project, it has just been so much about just really feeling and being present in this very different existence that we're all experiencing right now. Embracing the unique opportunity of it, and kind of leaning into the challenges and the realities, especially the ways, the opportunities to learn and to grow. So more specifically, as I'm working on Strikingly, there's really been a connection to a piece that I wrote in 2018, just a couple years ago, and it was actually commissioned by a Miyazawa artist who has been part of this festival and who is on this call. Hi, Hannah. Hannah Porter Oksenia is a wonderful flutist and a very, very dear friend. And this piece that I wrote for her is about 10 minutes long. It's for flute and piano, and it's titled The Whirring Dusk. So when I was writing it, I was really thinking about significant life experiences and the conflicting emotions and states of being with those. Pain and joy, fragility and strength, disquiet and peace, and how those things are entwined, how they evolve, how they can be very visceral. I'll start by playing a little bit of the opening of the piece. This is Hannah and the pianist Emily Phelps. Okay. So as I was working on, thank you, on the Whirring Dusk, I had very clear concepts about structure and transformation. Those were important things in this piece, but so much of it was just this, not a particularly profound thing to say as a composer, but just to share, just absolute, slow process, improvisation, so much time at the piano and at the flute, and just very slow work, just making sure you find just the right note for here and just the right sound for this and just the right way to transform this thing. And that's a pretty typical working style for me. There's a lot of mulling involved, a lot of mulling. And that's the thick of it. That's where I'm at with Strikingly, with Claudia's piece right now. And of course, with this idea of trying to be very present. And I've decided I'm at the moment working even more directly with sound. Perhaps this is a bit ironic. I'm actually at the moment using electronics to compose what will be an acoustic piece. There's a chance it may have an electronics part with it, but still in my head it's a solo piece. But it's given me a chance to work very, very directly with sound. And just kind of be able to live in that space without, even being encumbered by some of the natural tendencies of the things we tend to play or things we tend to gravitate towards. So ultimately, for all of us, once a piece is out in the world, the music really has to speak for itself. And that's what I appreciate, like in Claudia's introduction, talking about, the end goal is to produce meaningful and lasting works of art. I think that we all share that we hope to create something that people can connect with in some way. Connection, community, empathy. It's even more relevant than ever right now. And also these connections to our past and our future, which for me comes back to this idea of legacy. How did those before us bring about change? And in so many ways, as we read about these people and talk to these people and get to know them and their work, so much of it is about sense of self and clarity of vision and just a real innate need to create. And so that is something that I really do think speaks to all of us. And I think such a process of moving through these times is about us individually. I'm thinking about, what are my actions? What are my words? What am I demonstrating to those around me, especially my students? Who do I want to be and who do I need to be to make a difference? And then what is most true to me in my music? And how do these things speak to me musically? And am I, in what ways can we all fully embrace and realize the opportunity to share and to encourage that? And on all those questions, that's actually where I was going to leave off today and hand things off to Claudia to introduce Allison.
Thank you, Lisa. It's great to end with a lot of questions. Okay, Allison, allow me to introduce you. Flutist composer Allison Loggins-Hull is half the critically acclaimed duo Flutronics and serves on the faculty at Montclair State University. She has performed throughout the world and been commissioned by the Metropolitan Museum of Art, Alarm Will Sound, Carolina Performing Arts, and others, many others, I might add. Allison, welcome.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me? Yes? Yes? No? Okay. Fantastic. So thank you all for being here with us today. I'm really excited to be a part of this project and to talk with you all a little bit about, give you a little background information on myself and how I'm participating to this project in particular. So as Claudia mentioned, I'm probably most known, especially in the flute community, as one half of a electroacoustic flute duo called Flutronics that has been around for over a decade now. And aside from that, I have a pretty active performing career around the New York tri-state area and beyond, and I'm also a composer. So when I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about how I came to composition, and I'm going to try to be brief because I know time is precious right now. But I started off as a flutist. I started playing the flute when I was 10 years old and kind of went through the traditional training that most aspiring flutists, young flutists go through. By the time I had finished my undergraduate degree, which was in performance, I had this kind of like, I don't know, awakening with myself that I didn't necessarily want to exclusively be a classical flutist per se. While I deeply, deeply enjoy the traditional flute repertoire and performing in those arenas and like classical music venues and such, I've always had a very, very strong desire to be creative. And I have a deep love and affection for really all kinds of music. So when I finished my undergraduate degree, I kind of felt this pull to really like pause because I was going to go straight to grad school and get another performance degree and continue down that more traditional route. But I felt this great need to just kind of pause and take some time and figure out what I wanted my life in music to look like and what music I wanted to really dedicate myself to. so at this time, it was a very weird time because I was living in New York, and I was playing all kinds of gigs. I was trying out very different things. I was in a rock orchestra for a while. You know, I started trying to improvise and do all these things and just see like what else I could do, or what else I really enjoy doing. And the improvisation like slowly led to composition. And once I started doing that, I really felt like I had tapped into something about myself, you know, something within myself, and something that I felt a real need to like explore and develop further. So when I started composing, I used a lot of technology in my music as well. I started experimenting in the very beginning with like GarageBand, for example. And that of course has evolved over time, but I had, you know, a very kind of, I don't know, I don't want to say simple, but kind of like common introduction to composition that a lot of people do. And so I started writing music, and I put it out there, and I put it on MySpace, which at the time was like, you know, this great social media platform. I don't know if you young folks even know what that is who are listening, but yes, I put my music up on an artist page on MySpace, and my duo partner, Natalie, in Flutronics, found me and found my music. And it turned out that she was actually doing like very similar work and was in a very similar place. You know, she had gone through all this classical training and was now at this point where it's like, now what do I do, you know? And she was also experimenting with composition and technology. So she reached out to me and she was like, we should really work together. And I saw we had a lot of mutual friends and we had so many things in common that I was like, well, all right, let's meet, let's hang out and see what's going on. And we just like clicked right away. It's really funny. Like it turned out she lived in my neighborhood. She came to my house, and we immediately just had this like connection of mutual understanding and musical curiosity. So we've literally been working together ever since. And it was my work in that group that were really my composition kind of like blossomed. And since then, I've gone on to writing for different ensembles and instruments, and just working to expand my compositional language. So I thought that's just kind of like a brief kind of little background on me and my work. Obviously Flutronics is a huge part of it, but I've definitely have gotten involved in a lot of other projects too. So I thought I would share just a little bit of music to give you a sense of just like my aesthetic and some music I've written before I start talking specifically about my contribution to this project. So the first thing I want to share is actually a Flutronics piece that was, I believe we wrote it in 2014. And this was on our second album, 2.0. And it's called She Is. And it's featuring the Melodia Women's Choir. And it's for the choir, lead vocals. Natalie, my duo partner, is also a singer, C flute and alto flute. And the words are very simple. You might not hear them all where I start the clip, but it is strong, stoic, complex, stately is her song. So those are the words, and I'm gonna play just a little bit for you right now. So, second. Let me know if there's any issues. Okay, so that's just a little short taste of some Flutronics work to give you kind of a sense of how I use electronics into the music along with flute. And then I thought I would also share really quickly a piece that I wrote a few years ago, a solo flute piece I wrote called Homeland, and I wrote this for the Texas Flute Society for the Myrna Brown competition. And Homeland kind of represents this new, I don't want to say new, but this current place that I'm in when it comes to my compositional work, and that I'm really steering my practice into a place where I am responding to what's going on in a societal aspect, what's going on around me, either like issues that I feel need to be talked about, or voices that I feel need to be bolstered, or just either, I don't know, creating music that can also elevate like the individual story and narrative, because in recent years I have felt like there's been a huge lack of understanding of one another throughout the country, perhaps throughout the world. And I just felt like a real need to try to use my work in a way to try to facilitate more conversation amongst people. So this piece, Homeland, is about, I wrote it during a time where Hurricane Maria had just like devastated Puerto Rico, and the Syrian war was kind of at this peak. And also here in the United States, very similar to today, nothing has really changed. There was just a lot of like civil unrest really, and a lot of, I want to say like turmoil, because that's how it feels. So Homeland, I was thinking about, you know, well, what does it mean to, you know, when your country is basically just a complete disaster, like a mess, just broken, you know, what happens to that sense of like security or stability, or maybe even like patriotic pride when home doesn't necessarily feel like comforting. So Homeland, I was thinking about these questions as I was writing the piece. Let me just go ahead and start sharing some of that with you now. This is from a video I just made. This full performance, if you want to catch it, will be online next Tuesday, the 30th, as part of the New Music Gathering. If you guys want to check that out, I highly recommend it. So let me just share my screen here. Okay. This is just a snippet of Homeland. Oops. Oh no, hold on. 1 second. Here we go. Okay, so that's a little bit of that, but again, you can catch the full performance on Tuesday as part of the New Music Gathering. So for this piece in particular, let me just ask really quick, how are we doing on time? Because I see that it's 3:34. I'm fine to go on if you guys are. I don't know what the schedule is, but.
Just about time to switch.
Okay.
You know, 4 minutes, yeah.
I'll be super, super brief. So when Claudia first approached me about this project, I immediately thought about women who have been like the first to do something. So for example, like Sandra Day O'Connor was the first woman to serve on the Supreme Court. Madam C.J. Walker was the first female self-made millionaire. And this whole idea of like, what does it mean to be like the first, you know, to really be the one, like the leader, the one who actually does break those glass ceilings. So in the past months, as our conversations between this cohort here have developed, and we've been, you know, reacting and responding to what's been going on in terms of COVID, and also just domestically and societally here in the United States, I thought it was really interesting that a lot of the nations who are handling the COVID situation very successfully are all led by women leaders. And I thought that was really interesting. So I wanted to kind of keep this idea of like, you know, these women like being the first of their kind, but also examine how their leadership skills are different from their male counterparts in countries that aren't doing so well handling the COVID situation, much like this one. So some of the aspects, and I'll just say this and end, the kind of commonalities that are appearing in their leadership are their truthfulness with their civilians, their decisiveness, their implementation of technology and testing and such, and also their use of love and empathy. So this was like super like I don't know, amazing to me because, you know, a lot of these things I don't think we've experienced in our leadership here anyway. So I want to take these different aspects and really kind of explore them musically, of course, while also examining what's going on with their male counterparts and kind of have this, you know, I guess, show the duality of the two. So I'm going to end there because I really want to hear what Allie has to say. So thank you all.
Thanks so much, Allison. Great. All right, here we go. Allie, you are our final composer. So Allie Ryerson, jazz flute recording artist, composer, annual masterclass presenter, author of Jazz Flute Practice Method, tours internationally, former NFA Jazz and Low Flute chairs, founder of the NFA Jazz Flute Big Band, studied with Harold Bennett, John Weinhardt School, Meinhardt artist. Allie, welcome. Take the floor.
Thank you so much, Claudia. Can everybody hear me? Okay, cool. It is a pleasure to be here with all of you. Thank you. Thank you to Kathy, to Christina, for inviting us to take part in this wonderful festival, Miyazawa Festival. And Claudia, thank you so much for your wonderful project, and to Hal for supporting it for all of us so we can all be creative. So I thought I would quickly cover generally a few different topics. First, I'll give a little bit of background on myself, mainly because it does speak to how I came to composition. So I grew up in a musical family. Actually, I grew up in a jazz family. My father was a jazz guitarist. He got his start during the big band era in the late 30s and the 40s, and he went on to become a top studio player in New York City, recording with everyone, you know, of his day, from Louis Armstrong to Charlie Parker. And I have 3 older brothers. I'm the youngest, I'm the only girl. And every one of us is a musician. And we all started on the piano when we were quite young, and then we all chose second instruments. I actually wanted to play the trumpet. My mother didn't want me to. So somehow I chose the flute, and I fell in love with it. It was I was maybe 8 years old. So thanks to my father's influence, we all studied classically. So we had, a very solid training so we studied our instruments with great teachers, and I lived close to New York, so that's why I was able to take lessons from Harold Bennett as a teenager. But everything that I heard at home was jazz. So although I developed a love of classical music and have certainly played my fair share of it, I fell in love with jazz before I was even a teenager. And we had a family band, and my father did all the arrangements. And then when I was still in high school, one of my brothers kind of took me under his wing and would bring me on gigs. And the way that I learned about both improvisation and my repertoire of jazz standards was basically as we say, on the stand, on gigs, by ear. And so to my way of thinking, it was kind of the perfect storm to become a jazz player. And so that is in fact what I went on to do. And I've been working as a full-time musician, well, actually, since I was 20 years old. So it's getting close to 50 years. Is that possible? It is. Oh my God. Scary. So anyway, the whole piece about improvisation, which came to me naturally, but at the same time, there is so much to learn and understand about it. And so my experience through the years of having so many opportunities to play with so many great musicians, to tour, that was really, even though I did go to the Hart School, my real education was performing night after night after night. As far as how I got into composition, that didn't really happen until a few years ago. I mean, seriously, a few years ago. Through the years, I would write tunes. I've recorded a great deal in the jazz world, and very occasionally include one of my tunes because I was so enamored of the jazz standard repertoire. And I didn't take myself seriously at all as a composer. But when, let's see, when I became the low flute chair, this was after I had become, for NFA, after I'd been the jazz flute chair and started the jazz flute big band. I'll get into that in a minute. There were several low flute players like Chris Potter, Peter Sheridan, who asked if I would write something for low flute ensemble. Perhaps thinking because I was a jazz player that would be a snap for me. So anyway, I embarked on my new career as a composer, I say lightly, and especially in the presence of true composers. But what I found was the connection that I had when Allison was talking about the way that improvisation led to composition. I relate to that. And so I kind of have a phrase that I like and I kind of live by, in that when I compose, I like to think like an improviser, keeping that spark of spontaneity and inspiration. And then when I improvise, I like to think like a composer, so that I'm building a solo, I'm constructing, I'm developing motifs. And so I love the connection between improvisation and composition. And for me, personally, it's completely related. So one of the things, the very first thing that I did was actually an arrangement of some Dixieland tunes. It happened to be for the convention that was in New Orleans. So this is the clip I'm going to play for you has nothing to do with that. But what this has to do with is my introduction into arranging for ensembles had to do with something that was pre-existing, in other words, an arrangement, and adding my creative personal touch to it. So years ago, I had actually arranged a piece for, well, it was on Syrinx, Debussy's Syrinx. I think some of you may know that. And I had come up with like a piano accompaniment to it. But then in the last few years, I turned it into a low flute ensemble arrangement. So I am going to attempt to, now this is an NFA performance and I am not 100% sure how the quality is going to sound, okay? So let's see. So this is Syrinx Reimagined. Is anything coming out? Let's see. So that's just a little snippet of that. You could hear that okay, right? Oh, wow, the technology is, is terrifying. So, so I see that we're running out of time. So what I'm going to do is talk about my relationship with the Glass Ceilings Project. So when Claudia asked me, I was, of course, I was excited. I was a little daunted. And the big question mark in my mind was the fact that when I compose, I am not thinking, as Lisa said, I'm not really thinking about anything but the music. I mean, in my words. So it doesn't, there would be no way that I would be composing with any social relevance. And so I was on board. I actually wrote a piece and submitted it to Claudia in April. And she had asked if, of course, she said, you know, this may go without saying, but she wanted to say it, that she wanted me to write something in the jazz style. And so I wrote this piece, and it has a section where it's all thoroughly composed, but it has a section that sounds as if Claudia would have been taking an improvised solo. what ended up happening was that during when COVID started, and when this wonderful group of ladies started meeting on Zoom, and then George Floyd's murder happened, and our conversations were, I think we were all reevaluating not just our world, but also what was our relationship to this project, and to specifically also to the pieces that we were writing or had written. So what I finally realized was that my glass ceiling, in fact, has not been the fact that I'm a woman in jazz, because for some reason I kind of always refused to acknowledge that the fact that I was a woman would deny me access to the jazz world. And I think possibly because of that, I wasn't. So it didn't feel like a glass ceiling that I had to break through. The fact that I was a white woman playing in the jazz world, that is, you know, our country's classical music, but the gift is from the Black community. So I was the one craving acceptance and respect into the jazz world. So, but I was accepted. But my glass ceiling had to do with playing the flute. So what I ended up doing during my travels, I met so many aspiring jazz flutists who told me their stories of not being welcomed into their jazz bands, whether it was in high school, college, professionally. And I started to realize, you know, I've had the gift of being able to, not having that barrier, very, very fortunate. But I realized that this became kind of my mission. I mean, for nearly 20 years. It's why I started my master class, and that was the where I founded my jazz flute big band. And then I brought the idea to NFA, and presenting it that, you know, jazz flutists everywhere are kind of excluded from the jazz world. So as I said, I kind of made it my mission. And thanks to the NFA's support, jazz has become a big part of the NFA. And there's an annual reading session. I remember the first one, there were over 75 flutists who showed up to play. We have biennial performances with the Jazz Flute Big Band. And so anyway, my piece had been written for Claudia. She had it. And what ended up happening during COVID was I found myself, especially once the Black Lives Matter movement just bloomed, really. I found myself getting so immersed in everything. I'm writing like crazy now, and everything is deep in the jazz tradition. And so yesterday, I called Claudia and I said, is it okay if I write a different piece for you? And it has, for me, it just needs to honor that glass ceiling that that I want to help break for as many aspiring jazz flutists or classical flutists, because you're going to have a chance now to perform. It's untitled, but Claudia, you're going to have a chance to perform a piece where you're going to sound like a smoking jazz player. So thank you.
Yeah, great, Ellie. From rock musician to jazz, what else? I mean, what more is there? So listen, I know it's this has been fantastic just to listen to all of you. And so I guess, Christina, we do have, what do we have, 5 minutes for questions.
A few questions, yeah, if we kind of want to jump into those.
Yeah, let's do that.
Perfect. Let me just scroll back up here. And firstly, thank all of you for sharing your unique perspectives and how you've become a part of this project and even just come that far in your life and things that have helped you and inspired you. I just always love hearing just everyone's different perspectives and just listening to everyone's different journey. And I think it really is so interesting and a really great resource for a lot of young musicians. So our first question goes back to when Eve was speaking from Kathy. Kathy, would you like to say your question?
That was from so long ago.
Here, I might say it for her. I think she might have some internet problems.
Yeah.
So she asked Eve, what if the composition reflects your journey of understanding? She said perhaps the note intervals could be one way of illustrating the disparity.
Very cool, Kathy. Very cool. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because I've been thinking about attack rhythms and not so much about intervals, and getting maybe both of them operating might be a really cool way to do it. But that second question, or what you said first, of my awakening getting embedded in the piece, in a sense, that's what I think of making a piece as doing. Like when I write a piece, it's always about exploring something I don't understand fully in an attempt to get a new perspective and understand things differently. That's what I'm writing music for. So yeah, thanks.
And then we also had another question from Aaron. I don't know if Aaron wants to speak and talk to everyone. Well, Aaron would like to know, it was during the recording of Allie's piece, if the arrangement was available anywhere in particular.
I hit it. Thank you very much for asking, Erin. I don't mean to do business on on the panel. Just get in touch with me on Facebook. And thank you.
Great. Let's see. And I think a lot of that is just a lot of people kind of reiterating certain points. Like there was a lot of feedback about jazz and flute together, you know, and how they felt kind of trapped by some of those same limitations. And I'll encourage everyone again, whether you're on Zoom or Facebook, to drop a question in our last couple minutes for the whole Glass Ceilings panel, or if there's an individual person you wanted to hear something from.
Here's where it's harder when we're not physically together.
Right.
And sort of share the, you know, the moment we've said to each other in our Zoom meetings, when we actually get together, we're going to have an incredible party. Because we've been through a lot together already, and I think even today is another just sort of step in just the journey of getting to know each other really, and I do feel it's been a gift.
And where is it that this project, kind of the finale of it, where are all the pieces going to be performed at once together?
Well,
obviously a lot of events of ours have been canceled.
yeah, that's a good question that we can't answer at the moment, really, because it was supposed to be at NFA this summer, and presumably will be next summer, but you know, that's a year away now, and we'll be doing other things with it. And so there may be a whole production that would be online that we'll end up doing, and we talked about that fairly early on, actually, of doing sort of a production with maybe, you know, videography and so on, to go with it, and all the stuff that is possible actually now that we can do, you know, online and with technology. So maybe take advantage of that, start with that, and then maybe end up with the touring when we're, you know, allowed to do that. So it's a work in progress in that way too.
Yeah, definitely a lot to look forward to with that. And I also wanted to say thank you, Hal, for making this all possible.
Yeah.
Hal actually is local to our, like where our U.S. office is, where I live. We play in the same flute choir, and I had no clue that Hal, you know, had such a big hand in this project. So I just wanted to thank him too for allowing all of us to, in the future, you know, hear these compositions, maybe, you know, purchase and perform these compositions, but also get to talk to all of you in one place, you know, with kind of the common goal in mind, and get to talk to everyone. But I do want to just thank all of you again for sharing with us. I think it has been so, so valuable. And again, I'm very excited for whenever we can have live performances again and festivals and everything. I'm so excited to hear the pieces there, and hope to hear them somewhere online in the meantime. But again, Claudia, Allie, Eve, Allison, Lisa, thank you so much for joining us and spending your time with us this afternoon. And I hope that everyone really did found this as valuable as I have.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you so much. Thank all of you guys.
Yes, thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.